Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start our today's discussion by taking the important articles which feature in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. And with this, let's take up our first article for the day, which reads Missile Destroyer INS Mormugao commissioned into the Indian Navy. Now, this article appears in the newspaper because of the significant news that has come where the defense minister recently commissioned the stealth guided missile destroyer, which is known as INS Mormugao, into the Indian Navy. So this becomes important for us from the exam point of view, because we all know that the major advanced weapon systems and the development of these weapon systems which are done in the country, especially if they're indigenous, they become very important for us from the examination point of view. So INS Mormugao is also one such example in, and therefore it becomes important for us from the examination perspective. So we'll understand what this warship is all about, what are its main features, and what larger project is it a part of, and what strategic importance does this warship hold. So we'll understand all the points with relation to INS Mormugao and its associated projects. So what is this INS Mormugao? As we can see from the poster or photograph, this is a warship, but it's a very stealth and sleek warship. So it is the second ship of the Visakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyers of the Indian Navy. Now we'll understand all of this. What do we mean by Visakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyers of the Indian Navy? But to start with, we'll understand this first fact, that INS Mormugao is nothing but it is a warship which is a stealth guided missile destroyer. So it's a very sleek warship which has stealth capabilities, which means that it has the capabilities to protect itself from getting trapped in the radar systems of enemy warships. So it's a stealth guided, and it can at the same time have offensive capacities of destroying missiles. So this is the basic gist for INS Mormugao. Now when we say that it is a second ship of the Visakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyers, so this is where the mention of the Project 15B comes in, wherein what is Project 15B? The Project 15B is actually set up by the government of India to construct 4 such missile guided stealth guided missile destroyers, and the first ship of those Project 15B is known as the INS Visakhapatnam, which was recently commissioned last year. So the first ship of these 4 ships, we'll understand about Project 15B in detail in a while, but the first ship is the INS Visakhapatnam, and all other ships are then named after the first ship. So therefore it is named as Visakhapatnam class stealth guided missile destroyer. So it is second ship of these 4 ships which together form the Project 15B, to which we'll come in a bit. Then about why the naming of this is done. So it is named after the port city in Goa, and that is why it is being commissioned on December 19th as well, because this is the Goa Liberation Day. So on the occasion of the Goa Liberation Day, the defense minister commissioned this INS Mormugao, which is again named after a port city in Goa. And if we talk about its features, it is 163 meters long and 17.4 meter broad at the width. If we are to compare it with the first indigenous aircraft carrier that was commissioned recently, we had taken up this for discussion, which was known as INS Vikrant, is 262 meter in length and 62 meter in the width size. So we can see how narrow it is, how less in the width it is, which means that it which showcases its stealth capacities, and from its previous versions it is much more sleek. So these are the features with respect to INS Mormugao, which is the stealth guided missile destroyer. And the important fact is that it has a displacement of 7,400 tons, which means that 7,400 tons of ammunition it can displace, and maximum speed up to 30 knots or 55 kilometers per hour. It has powerful gas turbines which gives it the high speed. And the important thing about this vessel is that it is made up of 75% of indigenous content. So whatever material that has been used to build this warship, 75% is indigenously sourced and fitted with a myriad of indigenous equipment and major indigenous weapons. So this is the speciality of INS Mormugao, and therefore becomes a great symbol and example for the Atmanirbhar Bharat and indigenous defense production, the route on which we have embarked upon to increase our capacities in defense by producing it ourselves. So this is an example towards that route. So this is designed by the Indian Navy's in-house organized Warship Design Bureau. So this belongs to Indian Navy. Warship Design Bureau has designed it, and it is built by the Mormugao Dock Shipbuilders, which is a public sector enterprise located in Mumbai. So it is built by Mormugao Dock Shipbuilders and designed by Warship Design Bureau. And it is the second ship built under Project 15B, which has an overall cost of 35,800 crore. So approximately 36,000 crore has been outlaid for this project 15B, which is essentially constructing 4 stealth guided missile destroyers. And this particular ship has the crew capacity of holding almost 350 officials, out of which some would be officials, some would be sailors. So a total of 350 persons can be held by this warship. So we can see the all-round features with respect to this warship, that is INS Mormugao. Now let's talk about what all weapon systems are fitted inside this warship. As we saw, this is a stealth guided warship as well as a missile destroyer. So it has certain offensive capacities as well. So it is fitted with Barak 8 surface to air missiles. It would have these missiles. Then it is also fitted with the latest supersonic cruise missiles, which are known as BrahMos. So BrahMos surface to surface cruise missiles for long range engagement of shore and sea based targets. So it would have these high tech supersonic BrahMos missiles as well in order to increase its offensive capacities. Then it also has the indigenously developed torpedo launchers, anti-submarine rocket launchers, and it can also handle 2 multi-role helicopters, that is the Sea King and Dhruv. About Dhruv also, we had which is the HAL Dhruv, which is the light combat helicopter which India has recently developed. It also has a rail-less helicopter traversing and hangar facility, which means that it can also dock certain ships, so certain aircrafts. These are the weapons capacities with respect to the INS Mormugao. Then along with this, it also has something known as the Total Atmospheric Control System, or TACS. What does this do? It offers protection to the crew from chemical, biological and nuclear threats, as well as the state-of-the-art combat management system that can evaluate threats using analytical tools and create a tactical picture that includes available resources on board. Therefore, these warships have a secure network of data from its sensors and weapon system. So as we can make out from these features, we can see that this is a high-tech moving warship which does not just has stealth capacities, which means that it can protect itself from enemy radars, but it also has major offensive and weapons capacities as well to cause damage. And we all understand this by keeping this warship in the larger perspective of security in the Indian Ocean, where we are continuously seeing movements by not just China but other countries as well. All of these countries are increasing their military capacities in the Indian Ocean. China has come in, set up a military base in Djibouti. It is increasing its presence in the African coastal nations, in Sri Lanka and other parts. So even we need to be keeping our pace with it. And this weapons like this or warships like this is a big addition to the naval fleet for India. So this is the features with respect to INS Mormugao. Now let's talk about what is this Project 15B under which this INS Mormugao has been commissioned. But before we move forward, can we ask a question? Whenever we look at news with respect to weapon systems or warships or aircraft carriers being commissioned or being launched, what is the difference between these words, that a warship is commissioned or a warship is launched into the Indian Army or Indian Navy? What do we mean by that? So this needs to be noted that whenever we say that INS Mormugao has been commissioned into the Indian Navy, this means that it has been handed over to the Indian Navy by the shipbuilder. And when we say launching the particular warship or aircraft carrier, then it means that it has been put into water or put into use. So always remember, commissioning is the penultimate stage, and before commissioning and launch there are certain more steps that are required to be done, more trials are done, and then finally the ship or the warship is launched into water. So right now INS Mormugao is in the commission stage, where on December 19th it is commissioned into the Indian Navy. Now let's talk about Project 15B. What is this Project 15B? As we saw, the Project 15B was actually signed in January 2011. This project was basically to enhance our stealth guided missile destroyers. Earlier class of missile destroyers were INS Kolkata class. So they were known as the Kolkata class stealth guided missile destroyers, which had INS Kolkata, INS Kochi and INS Chennai. Before this also there were Delhi class missile destroyers, but the need was felt to have more advanced missile destroyers which would have increased stealth capacities. So the Project 15B was an upgrade of the Project 15A and to provide more stealth capacities to these warships. So therefore this was Indian Navy's new project to enhance their warship capacities, and therefore in this Project 15B a total of 4 ships are being developed under this project, which are all designed by, as we saw, the Warship Design Bureau and built by Mormugao Dock Shipbuilders, which is located in Mumbai. And we saw their names. The first one was INS Vishakhapatnam, second one is Mormugao, and the other 2 are INS Imphal and INS Surat. These are the 4 stealth guided missile destroyers which would be part of Project 15B. And when we say that these are Vishakhapatnam class destroyers or these are Kolkata class destroyers, so a ship's class describes a group of vessels of similar tonnage, usage, capabilities and weaponry. So it is the terminology that is given to them is to denote these features because they have certain similar features. So these are the important points with respect to INS Mormugao, missile guided stealth destroyers and Project 15B. Now let's talk about what is the strategic importance of INS Mormugao. When we talk about having missile guided stealth guided missile destroyers, what is the use? These unique set of weapons have high speed, high maneuverability and longer endurance. Therefore, they can provide a lot of increased capacity and they can be a part of the escort for larger vessels in a fleet or a carrier battle group, also known as a carrier strike group. So the real use of these stealth guided missile destroyers are basically to form a part of the larger vessel group which is not very fast in moving, whereas these warships can move fast and therefore they provide a lot of defense and offense capacities to the larger fleet. They are very swift, sleek and difficult to detect, and their role is primarily to protect the fleets and carrier battle groups from short-range surface, air and subsurface attacks. These guided missile destroyers are capable of anti-aircraft and anti-submarine warfare. We all saw the missiles that were fitted into the warships in order to enable this, and because of their speed, maneuverability and strike capability, guided missiles destroyers are key assets in various types of naval operations, mainly offensive one. And the state-of-the-art stealth feature. Stealth feature means that this feature enables these warships to not be easily detected by enemy warships. It ensures that it has the radar signature of a very small ship, and a very high indigenous component gives it a strategic edge. And not just this, according to officials, the Vishakhapatnam class is one of the most advanced ships in the Indian Navy, which can operate as an independent offense platform even without being part of a large formation. And with its modern sensors and communication facilities, this particular class is key asset in the modern network-centric warfare. So its increased sensors and communication facilities also give it the communication edge, where a network can be formed and it helps the warship again to increase its offensive capacities. So this was a holistic discussion with respect to this warship and all that was important to know from the examination perspective. So with this, we finish this article and let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Northeast is not the last part of country but gateway for trade and ties, says Modi. So this particular article features in the newspaper because Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister is attending the 50th ceremony, 50th year ceremony, or the Golden Jubilee ceremony, which has been completed by the Northeastern Council. So this particular important body, which is a very pivotal governance body with respect to Northeast governance and projects that are going on in Northeast, this is a very important body, and this Northeast Council has completed 50 years this year. That is why this body also becomes important, and the development of Northeast at the hands of this body and all the projects that are under this body also become important for us from the examination point of view. So we'll have a discussion with respect to the Northeastern Council. What exactly is this council? What are the other bodies and schemes that are running in the Northeast? What is the significance of Northeast? What are some of the challenges that the Northeast faces, because of which development was not earlier seen in Northeast, and what difference is now being created? What are the differences or the differences in efforts that are being taken right now? So we'll try to understand all of this. We all know when we talk about the Northeast region, we mainly associated with these 7 sisters. These are 7 sisters, and the 8th state is taken as Sikkim. So these 8 states make up the Northeast region, and the development of this Northeast region was earlier not given a very big priority, and therefore we see that this region majorly was underdeveloped. And this region already is a difficult region where the connectivity with India is very narrow. So we can see that only a small part of West Bengal connects actually the mainland India and Northeast India. This region is also known as the Chicken Neck or Siliguri corridor. This is a very strategic location. We see that all the attempts by China with respect to disturbing India's border security is done in this region. The Doklam Plateau sits in this side. The recent clashes that have happened between the India and China forces, the Tawang region, they also stand over, they are situated in the Arunachal Pradesh over here. So this region becomes very important, and that is why the importance of Northeast is much high for India. Therefore, it is very important what development projects or what efforts are being taken to improve the situation of the Northeast. So in this aspect, already a question has been asked in the UPSC examination, in the mains examination, where security challenges with respect to the Northeast were the area of focus of this particular question. Now, this particular article discusses the infrastructure developments that have happened in Northeast, and we all know that development of infrastructure and promotion of security in the region always go hand in hand. So these aspects are the very important aspects with respect to Northeast, and therefore we need to know about them. So let's understand about these important aspects. So we'll start with the Northeastern Council, which is the core of the article, which has completed 50 years. Now, what is this body? This particular body is under the administrative purview of the Ministry of Development of the Northeastern region. This is often known as MDonor. So we can see the importance that is granted to by the Union government to Northeast, where a separate ministry for the development of Northeast has been created, and under that ministry functions a body known as Northeastern Council. This is not a constitutional body, which means that this was not mentioned in the constitution, but is a statutory organization, which means that it was formed via a Parliament Act or an act passed in the Parliament, which was the Northeastern Council Act of 1971 and was amended in 2002. So as we can see, it was brought out in 1972, and in 2022 it completes 50 years now. It is the nodal agency for the economic and social development of the Northeastern region, which consists of 8 states of Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim and Tripura. And talking about the composition of this council, it comprises of governors and chief ministers of these 8 states and 3 members that are nominated by the president, which would do the job of representing the central or the union government. So this is the structure of the Northeastern Council. This is the body which has completed 50 years now. Then, before we go on to what efforts have been done in Northeast, what are the current challenges that are pertaining the Northeast India, which means that before we take up works of development or think about planning for Northeast, what are the challenges that plague this region? So we often understand these challenges in the newspaper. We see news flashing with respect to this thing. So first is obviously, which we talked about, isolation from the rest of India. We saw just now geographically how isolated Northeast can be with respect to rest of India, and that is why there is need to connect this region with respect to the mainland India. Then we have lack of efficient infrastructure. These 2 points go hand in hand because the lack of infrastructure actually makes sure that there is no development into the region. So if we have to increase development, we need development in physical infrastructure and also social infrastructure. So when we say physical infrastructure like roads, waterways, airports, and for social infrastructure we need education institutions, health facilities. All of the development of this both infrastructure will lead to development, and again infrastructure will bridge the connectivity gap with respect to Indian mainland and Northeast. Then the next challenge is the slow pace of industrial growth. We know that the pace of industrial growth in Northeast has not been the best in the recent years, and again infrastructure is also a linked point to this, where if we better the infrastructure of the region, the industrial growth in the region will also slowly increase. Then the major challenge which exists in this region is the territorial conflicts between various states, and in states also between various communities. This particular region is fraught with conflicts that are based on historical border disputes or differing ethnic, tribal or cultural affinities. So the example is the Assam-Mizoram border dispute. Recently the Assam-Meghalaya border dispute has also come into news. So various territorial conflicts exist in this region, which make the task of engaging development or improving governance in the region much difficult. Then there are various insurgency and political issues. This is also one major problem where the region, where the people of that region, not necessarily all of them are in favor or in tune with the central government's policies, and therefore there are various insurgency groups or terrorism groups involved, which has become a political weapon and is often the result of accumulated anger due to political, economic and social causes. So these northeastern states have witnessed a rise of insurgent activities and regional movements with a feeling of exploitation and alienation from other Indian states. So therefore this issue of connecting, improving the social connectivity of Northeast people with respect to the people of Indian mainland is a very complex one, and much work needs to be done on this regard as well. So these are the challenges that this particular region face. So we saw one main point over here. Improving the infrastructure of the region can give us the solution for a lot of problems, and this is what the Indian government is doing, where it is taking up and increasing the pace of infrastructure projects. And here is where the Prime Minister has come and said that during his term the stress that has been given to developing the Northeast region has been increased a lot, and the pace has been quite a lot as compared to the other previous years. So in this direction, the article also mentions the PM Divine scheme. This is a scheme to improve the infrastructure in the Northeast region. So we understand what this scheme is all about, and then what are the projects that the government has undertaken under this scheme and otherwise as well. So what is this PM Divine scheme? If we look at the full form, this is Prime Minister's Development Initiative for Northeast region, hence the shorter name PM Divine scheme. Again, this is a scheme which was announced in the Union Budget, this year's budget of 2022-2023, to address development gaps in this northeastern region. It is a central sector scheme with 100% central funding. So we know that whenever a scheme is a central sector scheme, the whole funding is given by the center. This is implemented during the remaining 4 years of the 15th Finance Commission from 2022-2023 to 2026, which has an outlay of 6,600 crore. And this is an addition to the quantum of resources available for the development of northeastern region. So this PM Divine scheme again is a addition to all those policies and outlay of projects which was done earlier. It will not be a substitute for existing central and state schemes. Who will be implementing it? Again, it will be implemented by the donor ministry that we saw, and the nodal body would be the Northeastern Council, which has completed 50 years. This council would be the implementing body of the PM Divine scheme. What are the objectives which this scheme wants? it wants to fund infrastructure convergently, which means that all the schemes which are working for the development of infrastructure in Northeast, they would do so in a single manner, in a joint manner. Then support social development projects based on felt needs of these particular people in this region. Then enable livelihood activities for youth and women and fill the development gaps in various sectors. These are the objectives under the scheme. And now let's take a look at what are the infrastructure projects that have been undertaken in this region. So the major infrastructure projects have been undertaken in this region, where the PM declared in the meeting that spending in the Northeast region has been increased to 7 lakh crore. So a total of 7 lakh crore is being invested in the Northeast region, where various projects in various fields have been undertaken. So if we talk about the rail, road and air connectivity, the construction works of various roads, airports, waterways have been taken up. So which means that number of airports in the region increased from 9 to 16 and number of flights increased from 900 to 2000 in the last 8 years. 4,000 kilometers of roads, 20 rail projects for 2011 kilometer and 15 air connectivity projects are being developed. And there has been a 50% increase in the length of national highways in the region since 2014. These are all statements made by the government. Then the waterways connectivity has also been increased, where the national waterways on the Ganges, Brahmaputra and Barak rivers, that is known as the National Waterway 1 and Ganges, National Waterway 2 on Brahmaputra and National Waterway 16 on the Barak, are under development to provide better connectivity. So all of these infrastructure development works are done. Then to improve digital connectivity, the optical fiber network is being increased with 6,000 mobile towers being set up at a cost of 5,000 crore. Then other projects that are being taken up, so PM inaugurated and laid the foundation stone for multiple projects worth over 2,450 crores. These include an integrated beekeeping development center and 21 Hindi libraries for Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura and Assam. These are in a holistic look, the infrastructure work and the development works that are being undertaken by the government to develop the Northeast region. This was a discussion on this particular topic. We finished this topic over here and let's move on to our next topic for the day. Next topic reads, India pushes for new biodiversity fund. Now, why does this article appear in the newspaper? This article appears in the newspaper because there's another international meeting, which is the United Nations Conventions on Biological Diversity or UNCBD. We often hear this in our environment textbooks. So the meeting of the United Nations Conventions or Biological Diversity or UNCBD is taking place, which is also known as COP15, is commenced in Montreal, Canada on 7 December 2022. This would be a 2-week long conference which would go from 17 to 19 December and was originally supposed to be held in Kunming, China, but due to the COVID restrictions, it was taken off from that place and is now being held in Montreal, Canada. But again, the host country is still taken as China only. So this is the backdrop under which this article is appearing, because the United Nations CBD is having its biannual meeting. So let's understand what is this convention and what are the main agendas for this year's UNCBD meeting. So what is this convention on biological diversity? As the name suggests, this again is an international agreement where many countries of the world came together and had the single objective of conserving the biodiversity of the whole world. And it is very important. Conserving biodiversity in one particular region or country is not enough. If we are to work together to conserve the forest and the biodiversity, we need to have a holistic global effort. And that is why the CBD became important, which dates back to the early 1990s, and it formed certain principles to develop or to conserve biodiversity, which were to conserve biodiversity, which includes species, ecosystems and genetic diversity, to use its components like wild animals in sustainable way, and to share the various benefits of these genetic resources fairly. Those resources might include medicines derived from bacteria or genes that produce desirable traits in crops such as drought tolerance. And parties to the CBD normally meet every 2 years at events known as the Conference of Parties, which is the meeting going on right now. So this is the gist with respect to CBD. Now, what is the agenda then with respect to this meeting that is going on? So there's a very important term that is discussed, that is the post 2020 global biodiversity framework. This is a big part of the meeting. What is this post 2020 global biodiversity framework? So the year 2011 to 2020 was declared as the decade for conserving biodiversity, and it got over in 2020. So a new framework was sought to develop after 2020, and this framework was named as post 2020 global diversity framework. This basically, these new frameworks have 4 goals to achieve by 2050. First is to halt the extinction and decline of biodiversity, which we know is taking up at a rapid pace. Second, to enhance and retain nature's services to humans by conserving, to ensure fair and equitable benefits for all use of genetic resources, and to close the gap between available financial and other means of implementation and those necessary to achieve the 2050 vision. So what are the action targets then, which comes under this post 2020 global framework? This framework has 21 action oriented targets for urgent action over the decade by to 2030, which includes to bring at least 30% of land and sea under the world's protected areas. This is a very ambitious dream that the target action plan has, where at least 30% of land and sea should come under protection. Then 50% greater reduction in the rate of introduction of invasive alien species, which again we know that have become a major problem, and controls or eradication of such species to eliminate or reduce their impacts. Then reducing nutrients lost to the environment and nature-based contributions to global climate change mitigation should by at least 10 gigaton CO2 per year, and that all migration and adaptation efforts avoid negative impacts on the biodiversity. This is what is the main agenda that would be discussed in the UNCBD meet, and the article mentions that India has pushed for a new fund, much like the loss and damage fund which was agreed in the climate change negotiations, a similar fund which would help developing and least developed countries to increase their efforts with respect to biodiversity conservation. So this was a discussion today on the important articles. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.